On this edition of Locked On Grizzlies, Ja Morant dunked on Victor Wembanyama. It may not have counted for points, but it counted in the hearts and minds of everybody that saw it. The Memphis Grizzlies metaphorically dunked on the San Antonio Spurs on Wednesday night. We'll talk about Ja's presence and return to form. We'll talk about positives and negatives of the depth that the Grizzlies currently have, and I'll weigh in on the G.G. Jackson and the G League debate. It's all coming up on this episode of Locked On Grizzlies. Let's lock in.
You are Locked On Grizzlies, your daily Memphis Grizzlies podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to this Thursday edition of Locked On Grizzlies. It is I, Joe Mullinax, your host for this episode. Yes, that is right. You heard me correctly. Host to Michael Cole. They're on the ground in San Antonio covering for the Commercial Appeal in Memphis, Tennessee. He, of course, is the Memphis Grizzlies beat writer for that publication. He's working. I'm here with you. Hopefully you'll stick around. We're going to have a great 30 minutes or so here on Locked On Grizzlies, talking about a good win for Memphis there in San Antonio, especially thanks to a strong second half performance. Today's episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by FanDuel. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. We are free and available wherever you get podcasts. As proud members of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team each and every single day. Like, comment, rate, review, subscribe on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, YouTube. Literally anywhere you can get a podcast, you can get Locked On Grizzlies. Make Michael and myself a part of your NBA and Memphis Grizzlies content consumption each and every time that an episode drops. Plus, we have the free daily newsletter now. Go to lockedondaily.com. Again, that is lockedondaily.com. Click on the Locked On Grizzlies tab, subscribe, get words from me about the Memphis Grizzlies in your inbox every day. I'm still contributing over at Grizzlead, but this is a way to get it sent directly to your mailbox. LockedOnDaily.com, go to Locked On Grizzlies tab, subscribe to our free daily newsletter. Basketball is a lot more fun when you win, right? And it's a lot more fun to host these shows after a win. I think a common misconception is content creators want losses. They want drama, right? And don't get me wrong, I've started my share of arguments a time or two in my decade plus covering this team. But it's a lot more fun when they win because we all started, and I still am, obviously, a fan of the Memphis Grizzlies. So you want to be in a position to talk about the positives. And I have been getting some slack for being a little too hard on Ja Morant. I may not always comment in the comments, dear listener, dear viewer, but I read the comments. And I am seen as a Desmond Bane apologist by some of you, which, yes, I will never apologize for being an apologist for Desmond Bane. I love him. Ja Morant is the superstar, right? People like to point out the contract differences, Bane being the highest paid player on the team. That is literally because of collective bargaining agreements and media rights deals and timings of contracts. Ja Morant is the superstar. Ja Morant has the signature shoe. Ja Morant is the guy that before his troubles was clearly the next face of the National Basketball Association from an American player perspective. In my opinion, he still is that. The NBA just needs to get back on board. And it was a great reminder on Wednesday night exactly of what Ja Morant is capable of in that space. Ja's performance against the Spurs had it all. It had elite basketball play, which has been lacking at times over the last several games. We've talked about that here on the show. We talked about it in the newsletter. And I wrote and talked about on the show that sometimes it's as simple as just playing more basketball. And that's exactly what it looks like is happening for Ja. He's getting back into a rhythm. 12 assists for Ja Morant. Only 2 turnovers. That is seismic. The Grizzlies only had 8 turnovers total. You know me if you're an everydayer to Locked On Grizzlies. I complain about the turnovers all the time. Only 8 turnovers in this game. The Spurs only had 11. It was a relatively clean game in that regard, but less than double-digit turnovers for Memphis. They protected possessions. They were in positions to score the ball more, and their lead guard, Ja Morant, led the way on that front. Only 2 turnovers, a 6-to-1 assist-to-turnover ratio. that is pretty darn good. He scored efficiently, 9 of 13 from the floor, only took 2 threes. So that means Ja was 8 of 11 on 2-point shot attempts. And some of those shots were extremely difficult, high degrees of difficulty. Not just because Victor Wembanyama was on the floor. Stephon Castle's a good defender. Vassal's a good defender for the Spurs. San Antonio has some talent. So it's important to understand that a lot of the shots that Ja was making inside the arc were pretty freaking impressive. And then, of course, there was the shot that he made over Victor Wembanyama that was the most impressive, that unfortunately did not count in the box score. The dunk on Wemby that's been heard around the world on social media and on all the highlight shows. Ja Morant is box office, man. He just is. And there was a question on one of the ESPN talking head shows. I want to say it was NBA Today. Who would you rather watch? Who is more box office, Victor Wembanyama and Ja Morant? And for me, it's not a silly question because Wembanyama is almost like Andre the Giant, right? I'm a big pro wrestling guy, so I'll bring up Andre the Giant. He's an attraction. You want to see the 7'5" guy that shoots 9 threes a game on 37% shooting. That's really impressive. And Wembanyama could very easily be the future of the NBA, if not the face in terms of public relations and advertising. In terms of being the next great player in the league, Wembanyama has a leg up, literally, because of his size, but also he's a very skilled player. Ja Morant is box office because when that dude has the basketball in his hands, you don't know what's going to happen. Unfortunately, over the last few games, it's been in a bad way, right? More turnovers than assists, poor shooting. That was not the case in this game. And this Ja Morant, the Ja Morant that had the audacity to attack Wembanyama off the dribble for a dunk, whistle blown, didn't count because of a foul before the play. But that Ja Morant is a guy that can carry a team and be a number one player on their way to the NBA Finals if Memphis is able to get there. I think the Ja that played in San Antonio on Wednesday night, can be that guy. Hasn't been around as much lately, but that doesn't mean that he couldn't come back around. And that's exactly what's been happening for the Grizzlies of late. Ja Morant in this contest was that face. He was that energizing force. He was the straw that stirred the drink. Desmond Bane did some good things, played well, 21 points, 2 steals. Jaren Jackson Jr. had a really strong fourth quarter, struggled earlier in the game, but he really put it together in the fourth to help close out the Spurs. The rookies struggled a little bit. Jalen Wells only played 21 minutes. Zach Edey only played 17 minutes. Not their best outing for the rookies that start alongside the Grizzlies' big three. But the veterans, and we'll talk more about some of those guys here in a minute that come off the bench, next to Ja in particular, really shined. Single game plus minus is not the most reliable statistic. I'll happily admit that. But sometimes it hits the nail on the head. In the Grizzlies-Spurs game, the leader in single game plus minus for Memphis was Ja Morant at plus 22. That means the Grizzlies were 22 points better than the Spurs when Morant was on the floor. That checks out. The Morant that dunks over 7'5" guys. The Morant that has the energy and the capacity and the skill set to create off the dribble for himself, have nifty finishes at and around the rim, to generate excitement for the game of basketball. Because again, we are all here to be entertained. That's the reality. The NBA, just like any other professional sports league, is in the entertainment business. Okay? You want your team to win a championship and you want them to be in a position to succeed at the highest levels of the sport. But at the end of the day, it's a means of entertainment. Ja Morant is as entertaining a basketball player as there is in the National Basketball Association. There might be guys that are better. There might be 10 or so guys that are better. There's certainly not 15 or so guys that are better. Ja may not be number 5, number 6, number 7 on the list, but I'll tell you what, he's number 1 in terms of viral moments, in terms of highlight plays against the Spurs in particular. Seems like he really thrives against San Antonio, the team he performed best against. That Ja Morant that we saw on Wednesday night can get the Grizzlies moving along in the playoffs. And that Ja Morant is worthy of investment by the NBA in terms of being the next face as LeBron and Kevin Durant and Steph Curry age out. Let me know in the comments. Hit me up on X at Joe Mullinax. How are you feeling about Ja's performance? Big win against the Spurs. Ja didn't do it alone, though. And we're going to talk about next year on Locked On Grizzlies, the help that he got from some of his friends coming off the bench and the positives and negatives of the Grizzlies having the best reserve unit in the National Basketball Association. Stick around. Today's episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by FanDuel. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. That's $300 to keep the action going. The FanDuel app is easy to navigate, and the variety of bets keep getting better with each and every game. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. No waiting around for your winnings. Whether you're betting on your favorite team like the Washington Commanders against the Detroit Lions, shock the world, baby. 10-point underdogs. That's ridiculous. I'll take the Commanders all day, every day. Or just looking to add some extra excitement to the playoffs as you cheer for my Washington Commanders, FanDuel has you covered. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $300 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Today's episode of Locked On Grizzlies is also brought to you by Skims. When I found out Skims was making underwear for men, I was intrigued. I've heard so much about their quality from family and friends, so I had to give it a try, and let me tell you, it lives up to the hype. I've always had issues with underwear, fit, comfort, just finding the right style for me. Skims changed all that. Their men's line offered something new for everyone, from boxer briefs to classic briefs, all designed with the perfect balance, comfort, and style. I was a big fan of the boxer brief. I work out, I get on the treadmill, exercise. It gives me a chance to be comfortable in my own skin and really find my groove as I start this new year trying to be a better in shape me. Skims underwear helps. It also helps running errands. It's being comfortable, reliable, and its lightweight material feels amazing. Shop Skims Men at skims.com/LockedOnNBA and Skims stores. Let them know that we sent you. And after you place your order, select podcast in the survey and select our show, Locked On Grizzlies, in the drop-down menu that follows. Make sure you're checking out Skims. Good stuff there. So, Ja Morant, Desmond Bane, Jaren Jackson Jr., the usual suspects, the superstars in the case of Ja, and the stars. Jaren's probably close to superstar status now, but Des more in the star realm. The three big guys for the Grizzlies, the three kings, the big three. They had good games, especially Jaren in the fourth quarter. Not so much a good game as it was a strong second half. The Grizzlies as a whole could say that, right? They were down double digits to the Spurs at the end of the first, and then Memphis had a 43-25 third quarter that helped get things back on the right track for Memphis at least. But it wasn't just those guys. I mentioned earlier in the show that the two rookies, Zach Edey, Jalen Wells, not their best outing, especially Wells, in a bit of a rookie slump. Santi Aldama's not in a slump. 20 points, 10 rebounds, those 20 points on 15 shots. Really impressive work from Santi. Then you have Luke Kennard, who shot 9 threes in the game, making 5 of them, had 9 rebounds, Luke Kennard did, plus 3 assists. Who is John Conchar? You don't need John Conchar. You got Luke Kennard right here banging home threes. Then you have Jay Huff, who went into the game, played 11 minutes, and really maximized those reps. 11 points, 3 for 5 from beyond the arc. The Memphis Grizzlies got good contributions defensively and in terms of rebounding from Brandon Clark. You saw some good minutes from Jake LaRavia while he was out there. Scottie Pippen Jr., 5 assists, no turnovers. The Grizzlies bench really was a piece of the Memphis victory against the Spurs. And the Grizzlies bench has been a part of the victories this season, here, there, and everywhere across the entire campaign. There's pros and cons to that. There's good and bad. Let's start with the good. Let's stay positive for a moment. When you have the injury problems that the Memphis Grizzlies have had, right? GG Jackson's still out, although we'll talk about GG. Technically not out. He's not with the Grizzlies at the moment. He's with the Memphis Hustle. We'll talk about that here to close the show here in a bit. GG Jackson close to returning. Vince Williams Jr. a little bit behind GG Jackson, according to Taylor Jenkins, but close to returning. Marcus Smart, you would imagine, will eventually play basketball for the Memphis Grizzlies again. As these guys return, the strength of this depth is going to be in how it's utilized. And that's a challenge for a coach Taylor Jenkins has had questions about his rotation all year long. Play your best players more. Seems like a simple fix. Desmond Bane played 33 minutes in this one. Ja Morant, 31. Jaren Jackson Jr., 31. A lot of folks out there, maybe you, dear listener, dear viewer, want to see those numbers up a little bit, right? That makes sense. It doesn't take a genius to understand that your best players playing more should lead to better basketball, theoretically speaking. But at the same time, with the pace that Memphis has been playing, the health issues and concerns, having the likes of a Luke Kennard, who, friendly reminder, was completely out of the rotation there for a bit, right? He wasn't even in the conversation. He wasn't getting run during games. For him to come in and be able to knock down 5 threes, that holds tremendous value, whether it's for Memphis themselves in a spot where they need an offensive spark once this entire team is healthy, or in terms of trade value. We know, not necessarily for a fact, but we know pretty clearly that the Memphis Grizzlies were legitimately interested in Dorian Finney-Smith of the Brooklyn Nets before the Lakers swooped in and picked him up. Kennard was a piece of that puzzle. John Conchar, who's completely out of the rotation now, also a piece of that puzzle. Maybe that package comes back around again. Maybe that's something we talk about on tomorrow's episode of Locked On Grizzlies when DeMichael rejoins us. Should Memphis re-explore that specific package? Do they need to expand to something involving Marcus Smart and Brandon Clark? I would argue no. And one of the reasons for that is that depth. But a con of that depth, a negative of it, is you can run into situations where players don't know their roles. And that's where communication as a coach is really important. And I know Taylor Jenkins knows that. You hear it in his press conferences. I get the printouts of post-game quotes. He talks about communication a lot. And part of that process is making sure that players see where they are in terms of their pecking order on the team and why they're there. We want to be upfront, honest, and clear. Ja Morant is the superstar. His role is fairly defined. But if you are a Luke Kennard, that's a great example. You sign a 1-year, 9.5-ish million contract in the offseason. Very clearly, you're not a part of the Memphis Grizzlies' long-term plans. They drafted your replacement. His name is Cam Spencer. You're going to be gone. They're going to convert his two-way at some point. The writing is on the wall. So as Kennard, you can make a decision how you handle that. And he's handled it relatively well. He has played some of the best basketball of his Grizzlies tenure over the last 5 or 6 games. He's not just shooting the lights out, almost 50% from 3 this season, but he is also shooting at a clip as a passer that is impressive. Over the last 6 games, he's averaging almost 4 assists a game. He's facilitating offense in addition to scoring the basketball. He is taking that and running with it when he gets those opportunities. And a part of that, Taylor Jenkins has told him when he's not in the rotation why and to stay ready. And he has stayed ready. That is a credit to Luke Kennard. But eventually, GG League Jackson, is going to be back sooner rather than later. A little bit after him, it's going to be Vince Williams Jr. At some point, you assume Marcus Smart. And guys like Jake LaRavia, who have had decent seasons, decent to good seasons. Luke Kennard, who has had a really strong stretch of play of late. They aren't going to be playing because it doesn't make logical sense for them to be playing. So what is the answer? What is the positive there? Basketball is not baseball. Throwing a fastball and then following up with the curveball, an off-speed pitch, trying to throw off the timing. There's elements to that. Schematically, there's ways that you can get there. And matchup dependency is possible too. There might be games where Zach Edey doesn't play as much. There might be games where it doesn't make sense to have somebody like Vince Williams Jr. out there. I don't know what game that would be. But the point that I'm trying to make is a pro of depth is being versatile enough to handle a vast majority of what you're going to have thrown at you by opposing NBA teams. A con, there's only so many minutes to play. And Ja, Jaren, and Dez are going to eat up a large chunk of them. Zach Edey, Jalen Wells, 2 guys that are going to make the all-rookie team. You'd imagine they're in the mix there already too. So where do those other minutes come from? Santi Aldama's not getting his minutes cut. Luke Kennard is doing really good things. He may not be in the rotation 2 weeks from now. Does a trade make sense in that vein? I would say so. And it's something that we'll continue to explore here on Locked On Grizzlies. Hit me up on X. Let me know in the comments how you're feeling about this idea of Luke Kennard, again, Jake LaRavia, so much impressive creation of offense from the number one bench unit in the entire NBA. How valuable is that in the playoffs, though, as those minutes condense? The Grizzlies probably need to start thinking about revisiting some of those trade ideas. We'll talk more about that, I'm sure. When we come back here on Locked On Grizzlies, we're going to close out this Thursday edition of the show, weighing in on the GG Jackson to the G League conversation. Going to be fun. Stick around. Today's episode of Locked On Grizzlies is brought to you by Robin Hood. With Robin Hood Gold, you can now enjoy the VIP treatment, receiving a 3% IRA match on retirement contributions. The privileges of the very privileged are no longer exclusive. With Robinhood Gold, your annual IRA contributions are boosted by 3%, plus you also get 4% APY on your cash in non-retirement accounts. That's over 8 times the national savings average. The perks of the high net worth are now available to any net worth. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. To receive your 3% boost on annual IRA contributions, sign up at robinhood.com/gold. Again, that's robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risk. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold at $5 a month for 1 year. From first match, must keep funds in IRA for 5 years. Go to robinhood.com/boost. Over 8% the national average savings account interest rate claim is based on data from the FDIC as of November 18th, 2024. Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold LLC. Make sure you're checking them out today. GG Jackson is on the road to recovery, right? We've seen the videos of him knocking down threes. We've seen the pictures of a very impressive frame. DeMichael Cole has said 20 pounds of muscle have been added to GG Jackson in his injury time. Got to remember, he's 20 years old, right? An extremely young player still, somebody that a lot of folks are excited about, and that is totally understandable. I'm excited about him too, right? Anytime people want to point out on social media when I say something like GG is just a garbage scorer, I don't mean a garbage scorer like he can't score. I mean like garbage time in a garbage season. That's not debatable. He put up numbers as an all-rookie performer on a really bad basketball team. That's not controversial. It shouldn't be. And it doesn't mean that he can't be a contributor on a good team. I was arguing for him as sixth man coming into the season. I wanted him to get 25 minutes a night off the bench, dropping bucket after bucket. That was my perfect goal for GG Jackson. Is that still possible this season? I don't know. Depends on his health. It depends on how he gets reacclimated to the Grizzlies. And that was part of the logic, I would imagine, from the Grizzlies front office, medical staff, and coaching staff, sending GG Jackson to the Memphis Hustle for some assignments and some minutes in G League games. This has frustrated some members of Grizzlies fandom, Grizzlies media. Old friend Anthony Sane, for example, and others have talked about how this makes no sense to them. And I do understand to an extent, right? Like, we talk about guys that aren't a part of the future plans. Seems likely that the guy that they didn't pick up the team option on in a contract on a rookie deal, Jake LaRavia, is not going to be in Memphis's future plans. It's going to be hard for him to be because they made that choice. Why couldn't GG Jackson play those 10 to 12 minutes instead of Jake LaRavia? I don't really have an argument against it. I do think that Luke Kennard has shown that he should be on the floor right now. He's playing good basketball. Same thing with Santi Aldama. And that is where I see the other side of the coin too, that depth question that we were talking about a moment ago. Yes, GG Jackson could be knocking off the rust with the Memphis Hustle, and that's exactly what he did, especially in the first half. He didn't dominate the G League. He didn't. But he doesn't need to. I don't need to see him dominating in the G League to know that GG Jackson is an important part of what Memphis is trying to do. He's literally there to get his conditioning up. He's there to find his footing and get into a rhythm of playing basketball. Game shape is different than practice. And do you really want a young player like GG to get those first reps after a serious foot injury that involves surgery in an NBA game? If the answer is yes for you, there's risk both ways. He goes in an NBA game and he isn't used to the speed and he struggles and his confidence gets hurt. Same thing is true of the G League, right? You send him down to the G League. Why am I here? Why am I here? Everybody talks about how great I am, and yet I'm playing G League basketball with guys that are hopeful to be in the NBA someday. And what happens if there's an injury in a G League game? In an environment where the athleticism is still there, it's professional basketball, but it's nowhere near what an NBA game is. The organization, the structure, it's not the same. So I see both sides of the argument when it comes to G League, GG Jackson. But I do think that the anger either way is a bit overblown. And I know that it's wild for me to be the voice of reason saying that. But if you're feeling a certain kind of way, either way, I would ask for you to reflect on the current state of affairs for the Memphis Grizzlies. You have the deepest bench in the NBA. Say you bring GG up and say you believe that he should be a starter. Okay. I think you can make a logical argument that GG Jackson could be the starter for the team. I wouldn't do that right now, but I think you can make a logical argument. I don't think you're crazy for saying it. My question to you is in response, who are you benching? Jalen Wells? Possible rookie of the year, Jalen Wells? You're going to sit him down, limit his role? If the answer is yes, okay. But that's not as easy of a question to answer as you think. Bringing him off the bench for Jake LaRavia makes the most sense to me. But is he better off getting 20 or so minutes playing for the hustle right now on a minutes restriction, controlled environment as best they can, trying to get his cardio up? Or just playing 10 minutes for the Grizzlies? If the goal is cardio and game shape as best you can in a G League environment, then it makes sense to send him to the hustle. Other NBA players, both veteran, rookie, young, in and out, all the way around, have done this before. It's not necessarily common. I think Anthony Sain has talked about that. It's not a common thing. I agree with him there. But it's not unprecedented for Memphis to do what they're doing with GG, especially a younger player. And especially a guy 6'9", 230-some pounds, shoots the ball well. One of the more physical, impressive players at his age in the entire NBA. You want to get his return right because the Grizzlies have a very tight window to make his presence as impactful as possible. He missed training camp. He's missed so much opportunity to play and be alongside other Grizzlies players and be in rotations and be in those mixes. They have a tight frame of ability to maximize what GG can be this year. And they want to be able to get as much of a sample size as they can as to what GG is for that point of the conversation we had earlier about potential trades. If you're going to go all in on a Luke Kennard trade that also involves John Conchar and multiple first-round picks, you want to make sure that that's the right decision. If GG Jackson can come in and be dominant or near it, Vince Williams Jr. can come in and be dominant or near it, or at the very least, two contributing role-playing wings who will be better with longer stretched-out returns and opportunities to get into rotations. You don't need to give up all those assets because you've got your mid-season acquisitions at home. That's kind of a tired thing to say. You hear somebody say that every year. But for the Grizzlies, that might legitimately be true. GG is an impressive performer. Vince Williams Jr., we forget how the two-way play of Vince Williams Jr., the willingness to do the dirty work as a wing, how much that will help the Memphis Grizzlies. And we haven't talked a ton about Marcus Smart, who is supposed to be that sixth man-ish guy for the Grizzlies, that leader of the reserves, a reserve unit that doesn't look like they need a leader at the moment, right? So I get it either way. Let me know in the comments. Hit me up on X. I'm cool if they call GG up and he plays Friday against the Spurs. I'm cool if he stays in the G League a little bit longer. I think you can make an argument either way. If the argument is cardio, more minutes playing in a game matter. And you don't want to necessarily do that in an NBA game where the record matters a little bit more and you're pushing for seeding and that sort of thing. But I agree that when he does eventually come to the Grizzlies, he's in the rotation. He's there, coming in for 10 to 12 minutes a pop to start against Jake LaRavia, or for Jake LaRavia. That's how I would do it. How would you do it? Let me know. Thanks for being with me on this episode of Locked On Grizzlies. As I mentioned a moment ago on our Friday edition of the show, we have another Spurs game to preview. DeMichael Cole will be back with me from San Antonio. They're covering the team for the Commercial Appeal. He'll be on tomorrow's show. We'll talk about Grizzlies Spurs. And I've got some trade ideas, or at least one big idea, using that Kennard and Conchar package that really could put a bow on this version of the Memphis Grizzlies. Could be the final piece, I think. We're going to talk about that on tomorrow's show. Make sure you're here for it. Make sure you're liking, commenting, rating, reviewing, subscribing, wherever you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Amazon, YouTube. Make the Michael and I and Locked On Grizzlies a part of your NBA Memphis Grizzlies content consumption each and every time that an episode drops. Thank you so much for being with us. It is much appreciated. I hope that you guys are being safe out there. I hope you're enjoying Grizzlies basketball, loving watching Ja Morant put up 12 assists and 2 turnovers as much as I am. Make sure you're subscribing to our free daily newsletter, LockedOnDaily.com. Click on the Locked On Grizzlies tab and subscribe to our free daily newsletter and make us a part each and every day, both in written word and in verbal, visual, however you take in Locked On Grizzlies. Make us a part each and every time a newsletter or podcast drops. Enjoy your day. We'll be back with you tomorrow. Until then, I'm Joe Mullinax. Stay locked in. Apple, Spotify, Amazon, YouTube. It's all good at Locked On Grizzlies.